The dangerous Betha room was filled with smoke and noise as aliens of many shapes gathered around the gambling tables, where strange games of chance and skill were played under the glow of red and green lights. And in the middle of this chaos stood Jinwoo Park, a human who should not have been there at all. 4 humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, and they were seen as weak, fragile, and not worth much attention. Yet tonight he was the center of every eye. The aliens laughed when they saw him standing alone, his dark hair damp from sweat, his hands clenched at his side. The tallest alien, a massive creature with horns, pointed at him and said in a voice like thunder, "This human thinks he can play with us. He thinks he can win our games." The crowd roared with laughter, and Jinwoo felt his chest tighten, but pride kept him from walking away. The bet was already being prepared, a strange glowing cube placed on the table, its shifting colors changing like liquid fire. The rules were simple. The one who solved the cube would win, but it was no ordinary puzzle. It was built with alien logic, with tricks and traps meant to break the mind. And yet Jinwoo did not back down. He could hear them mocking him, calling him soft, calling him foolish. Then came the announcement. The prize was revealed, and the crowd gasped for it. Was not money or treasure, but a person, an alien girl with silver eyes and chains around her wrists. She stood tall even in captivity, her gaze sharp and cold, as if she would rather die than be a prize. Jinwoo felt a knot form in his chest. This was wrong. This was cruel. Yet the crowd cheered louder, for they believed he would lose and the girl would stay where she was. The alien with horns leaned close to Jinwoo and sneered, "If you win, she is yours. If you lose, you belong to us." And the crowd screamed with joy at the thought of owning a human. Jinwoo knew the danger. He knew the risk, yet something inside him whispered, "Do not step back. Do not show fear." And so he nodded his head. The bet was sealed. The game began. The cube shimmered in his hands, burning cold like ice, and fired together the alien. Crowd shouted insults, their voices crashing like waves. Some bet on how long before the human collapsed. Some bet on how quickly he would beg to stop. Jinwoo ignored them, his eyes locked on the shifting patterns of the cube, his fingers trembling. But steady minutes passed, then hours or so it felt. The cube twisted and shifted in ways that made no sense. Lines became circles, colors bled into each other, until Jinwoo thought his vision was breaking. Sweat rolled down his face. His arms shook, but he remembered something from his childhood, small puzzles he once played with back on Earth when he was a boy alone in his room, solving piece by piece, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And in that memory he found calm. The crowd grew restless, their laughter turning to uneasy whispers. How was the human still holding on? How had he not given up? Yet his eyes burned with focus, and his jaw clenched with quiet rage. He would not give them the joy of seeing him fall. He would not let them treat him like prey. The alien girl watched him from her chains, her silver eyes unblinking at first. She had looked at him with the same cold distance as she looked at every alien. But slowly she tilted her head, her gaze narrowing with curiosity. Why did this fragile human refuse to bend? Why did he keep fighting time, twisted like the cube itself? The air heavy with tension. Then, with a sudden flash, the cube stilled its colors, aligned into a single glowing pattern that lit the hall with bright light. The crowd froze in silence. No one breathed for a moment, and then chaos erupted. The alien with horns slammed his fist down, shaking the table, his face twisted with fury. The human had won against all odds. Against every expectation, he had solved the unsolvable. The prize was his, the alien girl was his. The crowd screamed in anger, some in disbelief, others in rage, for they had lost their bets, they had lost their Jinwoo stood, shaking his chest, rising and falling. He looked at the girl not as a prize, not as property, but as someone who deserved more. Yet in that moment, with chains still on her wrists and the eyes of enemies all around him, he knew this was only the beginning. He had made himself a target. He had turned the whole room against him. And he had done it for a bet that should never have been made, but deep. Inside, Jinwoo felt something else to afire a small voice that whispered, "You are human, you can endure, you can fight, and no one in this galaxy has ever seen the full strength of a human heart." So the dangerous bet was won, but the true danger had only just begun. Against all odds, the hall was shaking with noise as voices of every kind shouted in disbelief. Some cried that the human had cheated, some demanded the game be played again, while others laughed nervously, as if the whole thing was a bad joke, but no one dared to take the cube from Jinwoo's hands, for the glowing pattern still shimmered with proof of his victory. Alien with horns leaned down, his face close to Jinwoo, his teeth sharp and his breath heavy with anger. He growled, "You are nothing but a weak creature. This wind means nothing," yet his eyes betrayed a small flicker of fear, because in their games, no outsider, no fragile being had ever survived, let alone when the alien girl still stood in her chains watching. Jinwoo, her silver eyes calm but sharp, her mind turning over what had just happened. She had seen countless challengers fail, and she had accepted that she would always remain chained. But now here was a human, a stranger, who had broken the pattern of her fate, and though she did not trust him, she felt a strange stirring deep inside, a tiny spark of hope she thought she had buried long ago. Jinwoo tried to steady his breath. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his arms felt heavy from the effort of holding the strange cube, yet he stood tall, or at least tall enough for a man surrounded by creatures much larger than him. He said, with a firm voice, "Release her, she is mine." Now the crowd erupted in shouts again, some mocking, some furious. The horned alien slammed his fist once more and said, "Then prove it, human, for one. Puzzle does not make you worthy. If you want her, you must face more trials." And the crowd cheered with cruel excitement. Jinwoo felt the weight of the trap closing around him, but he could not walk away, not now, not after seeing the girl standing in those chains. His pride and his sense of rightness locked him in place. So he nodded and answered, "I will face your trials." The first trial was a maze built for alien hunters, its walls shifting like living stone, twisting paths under a ceiling that dripped with glowing slime, the air thick with the smell of decay. Other aliens had weapons and claws suited for the chase, but Jinwoo had only his will and his mind. Gate opened with a thunderous clang, and Jinwoo stepped inside, the crowd roaring above from balconies carved into the walls. He could hear their laughter echoing down into the darkness, but he pressed forward every step, measured every corner, checked. The walls moved like breathing creatures trying to confuse him, yet he remembered patterns like the cube he had solved. He looked for the rhythm of the shifting stone, and step by step he found the way through. The crowd grew restless again. This was not how it was meant to go. The human was supposed to panic, to cry, to fail, but he did not. Instead, his stubborn eyes stayed sharp as he crawled through tight spaces and squeezed past traps meant to tear flesh. His arms and legs shook, but he kept moving. When he finally stumbled out of the maze, hours later, his body was bruised and scraped, yet his jaw was set with iron. The crowd hissed with frustration, some throwing objects at the ground in rage, but others fell silent, watching with a new feeling, one they had never connected with humans' respect. The second trial was worse, a test of pain and endurance, a seat of needles glowing with alien fire. Every challenger had to sit and hold their bodies still while the fire ran through their veins. Many had collapsed, screaming. Within moments, the horned alien grinned, showing rows of jagged teeth. "Surely the human will break now." Jinwoo sat. The needles stabbed his skin, fire spread through his blood, his muscles trembled like they would tear apart. Yet he clenched his teeth, his mind flashing back to long nights back on Earth, when he worked endlessly, fixing broken machines. His hands blistered, his back aching. No one praised him, no one cared. Yet he kept going because quitting was never an option. The alien girl's eyes widened as she saw him sit unmoving, his body shaking, but his spirit unbroken. She whispered under her breath, so soft no one could hear, "Perhaps Humans are not so weak after all minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The crowd grew uneasy again, for the humans still lived. His breath ragged, but his will stronger than any flame, and finally the Wern trial ended with the horned alien's growl of frustration. Jin-Woo staggered to his feet, skin burning but eyes blazing. He had not broken, he had endured. The last trial was announced, a contest of strength against a warrior twice his size, with scales like armor and claws. Like knives, the crowd shouted with glee, certain the human would die this time, but Jin-Woo stood ready, his body battered, his skin raw, yet his spirit unyielding. The fight began. The alien warrior charged with a roar claws. Swiping, Jin-Woo dodged barely. The crowd screamed. The alien swung again. The human ducked, rolling across the sand, his chest heaving. He had no claws, no armor, no weapon, but he had grit, and he had speed. Every move was survival, every dodge was instinct. The alien grew furious, wasting energy while Jin-Woo kept moving, kept waiting for the one mistake. Finally it came. The warrior stumbled forward, and Jin-Woo threw all his weight, all his fury into a strike that smashed against the creature's throat. The alien staggered, choking, and fell. Silence washed over the arena. The human had won again, against all odds. Horned alien stood frozen, rage and disbelief twisting his face, while the girl's silver eyes shone with something new, not just curiosity, not just hope, but a spark of respect, the kind reserved only for those who fight when they should already be Brikengen. Woo stood in the sand, gasping for air, his body broken, but his spirit burning like fire. He had faced the trials and survived, and though the crowd roared with anger, deep inside they knew what had just happened could not be undone. Human had shown them something they could not deny, that a fragile man could endure what no other dared to face, and he had done it not for gold, not for glory, but because he refused to surrender. And so the night ended, not with laughter, but with silence, for the galaxy had just seen the rise of something it did not yet understand, the strength of the human will. The alien girl Erna was quiet after the trials, the air heavy with smoke and sweat and anger. The crowd had no more laughter left in them, for the human had done the impossible again and again. Now he stood trembling in the sand, his body bruised and scarred, but his eyes still alive with fire, and no one knew what to do with such a sight. The horned alien growled, his deep voice echoing against the walls. The human has survived, he has passed the trials by our law, the prize is his. And with those words the chains rattled as guards dragged the alien girl forward. Her silver eyes sharp and cold, her posture tall, even though her wrists were bound by glowing cuffs. She walked with pride, as if no chain could break her spirit. Jin-Woo's chest tightened when he saw her up close for the first time, her skin faintly glowing under the light, her hair like strands of starlight. Her eyes filled with defiance, not fear. She looked at him not like a savior, not like an enemy, but like a puzzle, a question waiting to be answered, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. While the crowd jeered from above, the horned alien sneered, shoving the girl closer to him. She is yours, human, treat her as property if you dare. But the way he said it carried poison, because in their culture a prize was nothing but an object, a tool to be used and discarded. Yet Jin-Woo's heart twisted at the thought he could not see her as a thing, no matter how the aliens demanded it. Jin-Woo stepped forward, his body shaking from exhaustion, but his hand steady as he reached for the cuffs. He pressed the release rune. The locks hissed and opened with a sharp sound. The chains fell to the ground, clattering across the stone floor. The crowd gasped in shock, some in outrage, others in disbelief. The girl looked at him with narrowed eyes, her lips parting slightly as if to ask, "Why you are free?" Jin-Woo said, his voice rough but clear, and the silence that followed was louder than the crowd's earlier screams. Every alien in the hall stared with wide eyes, their world turned upside down, for never in their memory had someone freed a prize willingly. The girl did not run, she did not smile, she simply stood watching. Him with those silver eyes filled with storms, she spoke for the first time, her voice soft but edged like a blade. "Why do you do this, human? What do you want from me?" Her words carried suspicion, heavy and sharp, as if she had asked that question many times before. Two others who only wanted to own her, Jinwoo, met her gaze, his own voice steady, though his body was weak. "I do not want to own you. I only want you to choose for yourself. If you wish to leave, then leave. If you wish to stay, then stay." The girl studied him, her eyes flicking over the bruises, the burns, the cuts that marked his skin. He had suffered through trials that even seasoned warriors could not endure, and yet he freed her. When he could have claimed her, she felt something stir. Inside her chest, something she did not want to name, not yet. The crowd, however, was far from finished. Whispers turned to growls, and growls to shouts the aliens could not accept. What had just happened? They demanded punishment. They demanded the girl returned. They demanded the human be struck down for insulting their traditions, and in their rage, the arena shook again with fury. The horned alien raised his hand, silencing them with a glare. "This human thinks he is clever. He spits on our ways, but he will learn the price of defiance. Let him leave with the girl. Let him think he has won, for soon the galaxy will remind him what it means to steal from us." And his words spread like poison through the crowd, who nodded and muttered with hate. Jinwoo knew the danger was not over. He knew every eye would now watch him, every shadow would now hold knives, yet he did not regret what he had done. He turned to the girl, offering his hand, not as a master, but as a companion. She hesitated, her pride refusing to bend, yet her instincts whispering that this man was different. Lowly she placed her hand in his, not with trust, not with surrender, but with a cautious choice, and the crowd saw it with burning fury, the human and the alien girl walking side by side out of the arena, leaving behind the chains that once bound herds. They stepped into the cold night air. The city around them glittered with strange lights, neon towers rising like teeth, and alien creatures moving through the streets whispering. Rumors already spreading of the human who had won the trials and freed his prize. Jinwoo felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing down on him. But beside him walked the girl unchained, and though her steps were silent, her presence was strong. For the first time in years, Lyra spoke her true name aloud, her voice almost a whisper, but clear. "I am Lyra," she said, and Jinwoo nodded his head, replying simply, "I am Jinwoo." And in that small exchange a thread was tied, a fragile connection in a galaxy that had no place for either of them. Yet danger was already stirring in the shadows, enemies plotting revenge, rivals sharpening blades because the bet had been broken, the traditions had been mocked, and the human had turned a prize into a partner. And no one in that city would forgive him easily. But for now, under the stars and the neon glow, the two walked together, free yet hunted, and the bond between them, though fragile, was stronger than any chain. A bond begins. The city at night was alive with strange lights and voices, neon signs glowing in colors Jinwoo had never seen on Earth, shadows stretching long across the stone streets, while alien creatures moved with quick steps, whispering as they passed. For the rumor of the human who won the bet had already spread like fire, and every pair of eyes that turned toward him carried curiosity, anger, or greed. Lyra walked beside him, her silver eyes scanning every corner, every alley, every rooftop, her body tense like a warrior waiting for an ambush. Though her chains were gone, she carried the memory of them in every step. Her voice finally broke the silence between them when she asked, "Where are you going, human?" And Jinwoo answered simply, "Away from here, anywhere safer than this." They reached a quiet street away from the arena and slipped inside a small inn hidden between tall towers. The innkeeper, a thin-scaled alien, looked at them with suspicion, but greed overpowered caution, and he gave them a room high above the street. When the door closed behind them, Jinwoo finally let his tired body fall against the wall, his chest heaving as he fought to stay awake. "Rue May Squire," Lyra stood by the window, watching the city glow, her face calm, but her mind storming. She had been taken from her home. When she was young, sold and resold until chains became her only companion. She had learned not to trust words, not to trust promises, and yet here was a human who had freed her when he had every reason to keep her. She turned and asked him again, "Why did you risk yourself? Why did you fight through the trials when you could have walked away?" Jinwoo met her gaze, his voice rough from exhaustion. "Because it was wrong, because no one should be chained, no one should be treated like a prize, because I could not stand there and do nothing." Lyra listened to his words, trying to find the lie, trying to find the selfish reason. Yet all she saw in his eyes was stubborn fire. She sat down across from him, her voice quieter than before. "I do not understand. Humans are said to be weak and selfish, yet you are not weak, and your selfishness is strange. You fight for others when you have nothing to gain." Jinwoo gave a tired laugh, not because he thought it was funny, but because her words cut deep into a truth he had always lived with. Maybe that is all humans have. Maybe we are weak. Maybe we break easy, but we do not stop. We endure. We fight, even when it makes no sense. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the edge of her guard soften. She saw not just a human, but a man who carried scars, invisible and visible scars, that told her he had known struggle long before he stepped into the arena. Still, she did not allow herself to trust fully, not yet. Instead, she asked, "What will you do now? Do you think they will let you walk away after what you did?" Jinwoo's expression hardened. "No, they will come after me, after us. But I will not hand you back to them. I will not surrender you to chains." Again, his words carried weight, not just promise, but a vow. And Lyra felt her chest tighten with something she could not name. The night grew colder, silence filling the room as both of them sat with heavy thoughts. Outside voices shouted in the distance, echoing through the narrow streets. Patrols, searching, already hunting. The innkeeper's greed would not keep them safe for long, and Lyra knew it. She turned to Jinwoo, her silver eyes sharp. "If you plan to survive, you will need me." Jinwoo raised his head, curiosity flickering. "What do you mean?" Lyra lifted her hand and for the first time revealed a fragment of her hidden power, a soft silver glow wrapping around her fingers like liquid light. The air hummed with strange energy. She whispered, "I am not only a prisoner, I am of a people who once walked with stars in their hands, and though my power is broken by years of chains, I still carry pieces of it." Jinwoo watched in silence, his heart racing, not from fear, but from awe. He realized then that Lyra was more than a prize, more than a victim. She was dangerous, and yet she had chosen to show him this truth. Lyra's voice grew stronger. "You freed me, but freedom alone will not keep you alive. You need me, and I need you if we are to survive this city and the enemies already gathering in its shadows." Jinwoo nodded slowly, his mind clear through the haze of pain and exhaustion. "Then we stand together, and so a fragile bond began, not of master and prize, not of savior and victim, but of two souls bound by choice and danger. The human who refused to surrender, and the alien girl who had endured years of chains, found themselves tied together not by force, but by the smallest thread of trust. Outside, in the alleys, figures whispered plans. Weapons glinted under the neon glow. Rival gangs and angry elites swore vengeance for the insult dealt to their pride. They would not rest until the human was crushed and the girl returned. But inside the small room, two unlikely allies prepared without words, knowing that every moment ahead would test them. Lyra finally turned from the window, her voice soft but firm. "I will walk with you, Jinwoo. But remember, I am not yours, I am my own." He nodded, his eyes heavy, but his spirit steady. "I never wanted to own you, Lyra. I only wanted you free." For the first time her lips curved not into a smile, but into something close to one, and in that silent exchange, the bond between them grew stronger, though fragile. Like glass, it was a bond born in fire and fear, and it would carry them into battles they had not yet imagined. The price of winning the night did not last long. For whispers spread faster than fire across the city. Every tavern, every market, every shadow carried the story of the human who won the impossible trials and freed the silver-eyed girl, and with every retelling the anger of the powerful grew sharper. For Jinwoo had not only beaten their games, he had broken their pride, and pride was a wound no alien elite could leave unpunished. Lyra woke before dawn, her senses sharper than Jinwoo's. She heard the scrape of boots on stone, the low growl of voices. Outside their door she shook him awake, whispering danger. He sat up, groggy but alert, his hand already reaching for the small blade he had taken from the arena guard. The noise grew louder, heavy fists banging against the door, and then a voice, cold and cruel, shouted, "Human, give back the girl or we will burn this place down." The inn shook as more fists slammed against the wood. The innkeeper downstairs shouted in fear, begging them to leave his building alone, but greed could not shield him from the wrath of the mob. Lyra grabbed Jinwoo's arm, pulling him to the window, her voice sharp. "We cannot stay, we must move now." He followed without question, climbing out onto the ledge. As the door splintered behind them, they slipped into the narrow alleys of the city, moving fast between glowing signs and dripping pipes, shadows twisting around them, Lyra's silver light guiding their path. Dinwa's breath ragged as he forced his body to keep pace, the wounds from the trials still raw and burning, but he refused to slow down. He could feel the weight of enemies behind them like a storm ready to swallow them whole. The alleys twisted like a maze, neon lights flickering overhead, while alien gangs poured into the streets, hunting them. Some carried blades shaped like claws, others strange weapons that crackled with energy. Shouts echoed from every side, "Cut them off, trap them alive." Jinwoo tightened his grip on the blade, his eyes burning with the same fire that had carried him through the trials. He would not let them take Lyra back. Not while he still breathed. They turned a corner, only to find a group blocking the path, their eyes glowing with hunger for violence. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hand, silver light bursting from her fingers, the air rippling with power. The gang froze for an instant, fear flashing across their faces. Then the light struck the ground in front of them, exploding into a wall of sparks. They stumbled back, shouting curses, and in that moment, Jinwoo pulled her through another alley. For the first time since her chains had fallen, Lyra fought beside someone, not as a weapon forced to obey, but as a partner choosing her own path, and the thought filled her chest with a strength she had almost forgotten. She glanced at Jinwoo, her voice calm but fierce. "You fight like a fool, yet your spirit does not break. That is why they fear you." Jinwoo gave a rough laugh. Though his lungs burned, "Maybe they should fear you more." The chase did not end, it only grew worse. Words spreading like wildfire through the city, bounty hunters stepping from shadows, their weapons gleaming, each one wanting the glory of returning the girl and breaking the human who had insulted them. Jinwoo and Lyra ducked through markets where vendors cursed at them, jumped across bridges where steam hissed from broken pipes, and crawled through tunnels where the stench of rot filled their lungs. Yet still they moved, never stopping. Finally, they reached the edge of the city, where towers bent over a dark river glowing with strange colors. Here they stopped to breathe, their bodies shaking, their hearts racing. Lyra looked at Jinwoo, and for the first time her voice softened beyond pride, beyond suspicion. "You risk everything for me. You do not even know me." Why? Jinwoo wiped sweat from his brow, his voice quiet but steady. "Because no one deserves chains. Because I could not watch you suffer. Because humans fight for what feels right, even when it makes no sense." Her silver eyes locked onto his, and something shifted inside her, something she could not push away. She saw the truth in his words, and it stirred feelings she had long buried. But before either of them could speak, the shadows around them moved, figures stepping out, weapons gleaming. Their leader, tall with eyes burning red, grinned and said, "The human thinks he has won, but his victory is our feast." Ambush came fast, the gang lunging forward, blades flashing. Jinwoo raised his weapon, ready to fight, though His arms trembled from exhaustion. Lyra stepped beside him, silver light, blazing brighter than before. Together, they struck back. Jinwoo, ducking and weaving, his blades slashing through claws, while Lyra's power lit the night like a storm, every strike. Every move carried desperation, yet also unity, for neither of them fought alone. The battle raged across the riverbank, sparks, flying screams, echoing water splashing as bodies fell. Jinwoo took blow after blow, yet refused to fall. Lyra's voice shouted above the chaos, guiding him, warning him, shielding him, and for the first time, she felt what it meant to fight with someone who valued her not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as a person. When the last of the gang fled into the shadows, the night fell. Quiet again, the river glowing under the stars. Jinwoo dropped to one knee, his breath shallow, but his spirit still unbroken. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand glowing faintly as she pressed it to his wounds, whispering, "Hold on, human, for your fight is not yet over." And in that moment, under the neon glow and silver light, the bond between them grew deeper, forged not by chains or bets, but by blood. By blood, by danger, and by choice. They were no longer prize and gambler, no longer stranger and captive. They were something more, though neither dared to name it yet. But above them, in the towers high and cruel, the elites watched with burning eyes. Their pride shattered, their rage growing. The price of winning had only begun, and the true hunt was yet to come. More than a prize, the city did not sleep, and neither did the enemies who hunted them. Whispers ran across every street. The human has broken the law. The girl with silver eyes has escaped. The elites will not allow this to stand, and in every corner, blades were sharpened and traps were prepared, for the pride of the powerful was a wound bleeding rage. And Jinwoo and Lyra were at the center of it. Jinwoo's body was weak after the riverbank battle, his wounds deep, his strength fading, yet he pushed forward step by step, never letting his spirit collapse. For Lyra walked beside him, her silver light guiding the way, and he knew he could not fall, not yet, not when she had chosen to fight with him. Lyra's heart was torn. She had sworn never to trust again, never to feel hope, and yet the human's stubborn fire had broken through the walls she had built. She watched him stumble, his breath heavy, but his eyes still burning, and she whispered softly, "You should have left me in chains, human. It would have been safer for you." And Jinwoo shook his head with a weak smile. Safer maybe, but right? No, never there. Path led them not to safety, but back into danger, for the elites themselves sent word that the human must appear before them. The arena would be opened once more, not for games, not for trials, but for judgment, and refusal was not an option. Jinwoo knew that running forever was impossible. They would chase him to the ends of the stars, so he chose to face them, to end it now. The arena was filled again, voices crashing like waves, a sea of anger and curiosity, for the human had returned, walking slowly, his steps heavy, but his spirit unbent. Lyra beside him, unchained, her silver eyes glowing with quiet strength. The horned alien who had mocked him before stood high above, sneering, "You defied us, you freed a prize. You shamed our law today, human, you will pay the price." The crowd roared, their thirst for blood rising, yet Jinwoo raised his voice, though weak it carried through the arena. "I do not stand here for glory, I do not stand here for games. I stand because no one deserves to be a prize, no one deserves chains. You call this law. I call it cruelty, and I will not bow to it." I erupted around him, sharp and cruel. But Lyra stepped forward, her voice clear like a blade cutting through the noise. "I was taken when I was young, forced into chains, forced into silence for years. You made me less than a person, but today I speak for myself, and I choose to stand with him, not because he won me, not because he owns me, but because he freed me and gave me back my will." The crowd stilled, shock spreading like ripples through water. Never had a prize spoken like this, never had an alien girl declared her own choice. The Horned Alien snarled, "Furious, then you both shall die." He raised his hand and warriors surged forward, weapons gleaming, the crowd screaming with madness. Battle began faster than breath. Jinwoo drew his blade, though his body was broken, his spirit was iron. He fought with every ounce of strength, ducking and striking, blocking claws with sheer will. Lyra stood beside him, her silver light blazing brighter than ever, striking enemies down with bursts of energy, each wave of power born not of chains, but of choice. The arena shook under the clash, dust rising, screams echoing, sparks flying. Jinwoo bled, his arms trembling, yet he refused to fall. Every strike he made carried the voice of his people, a voice that said, "Humans do not surrender." Lyra's light flared like a storm, her voice shouting his name, her power weaving with his will. Together they became more than prey, more than rebels. They became a stormat. Last Jinwoo stood face to face with the horned alien, the crowd holding its breath. The giant roared, swinging a weapon heavy as stone. Jinwoo barely dodged the strike, his body breaking under the force, but he refused to yield. He surged forward, blade flashing, and struck with all his fury, his blade cutting through pride, through arrogance, through chains. The horned alien fell. Silence rolled across the arena. Only the sound of Jinwoo's heavy breath and Lyra's glowing steps filled the air. She raised her voice for all to hear. "I am Lyra. I am not a prize. I am not property. I am my own, and I choose to walk with him, the human who fought not for gain, but for what is right." The silence broke into chaos. Some roared in anger, some bowed their heads in awe, for in that moment the law of chains was shattered by courage and choice. Jinwoo fell to one knee, his body weak but his spirit blazing. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her silver eyes soft with something close to warmth. "Never expected to win," she whispered, "but you did not win me as a prize. You won my trust, you won my respect, and perhaps one day you will win even more." Jinwoo gave a faint laugh, his breath ragged. "Maybe I already did." Tether. They rose from the sand, not as master and slave, not as gambler and prize, but as partners, as equals. Walking side by side, the crowd watched as history changed before their eyes, and the story of the human and the alien girl spread across the stars. For what began as a dangerous bet ended as something far greater, a bond forged in fire and chains. A bond that proved humanity was not weak, not fragile, not meaningless. Humanity was stubborn, humanity was fierce, and humanity was something the galaxy had never seen before. And so the tale closed, not with chains, but with freedom, not with silence, but with choice, not with a prize, but with something far stronger, a promise.